Hello, good people, and welcome back to Econ Videos. Today is the third installment of Unit 1, and this lesson is titled Financial Influences. If you're sitting there thinking, well, nobody can influence how I spend my money, that is not true. At some point in your life, you have been influenced by some sort of outside factor in how you spend your money or how you even decide to allocate or move around your resources. So, the first thing that you could be influenced by or use to influence others are your own personal choices. Okay? So, how do you make choices with your resources? All right, we got to talk about choices before we can talk about how to get influenced. Excuse me. So, when we talk about timing, is it good or is it bad? So, do I buy a house now or do I wait and see if the price goes down? Do I go ahead and buy those shoes or do I wait until later on? Do I buy that car or do I wait until the next model year comes out when the old model year is a little bit older and looks pretty much exactly the same? What do I do? Okay. If it's 7 o'clock, should I go out and about to try and get in the drive through line of a restaurant? If it's 7 p.m., right around dinner time, should I wait another time? So it depends on what you want to do with your resources for timing. Now, what about supplies? Okay, so there are very few Louis Vuitton handbags in the world, okay, and therefore, since the supply is very small, if there are only 150 of this handbag and there are 7 billion people in the world, okay, that means that only a select few humans are going to be able to own that bag, all right? And so, is the supply in a shortage? Are there very few of them? Or is it in a surplus? Are there 75,000 of them? Here recently, mid coronavirus, we were in a giant toilet paper shortage across the country because every Karen and Deborah and whoever else got into the grocery store and were buying up packs on packs on packs of toilet paper. And so they were extremely short in supply. There were very few of them available and a whole bunch of people who needed them. All right, we would like to think that we would, in a normal situation, we would be in a surplus where you go to like your local Walmart and there's like 35 bajillion packs of toilet paper on the shelf, but not quite so. Okay, so how do you make choices with your resources? Do you go ahead and go and buy 14 packs of toilet paper, anticipating, the apocalypse? Or do you just kind of wing it and wait around? Okay. Or planning. Planning can also impact how you choose your resources or not planning. If you don't have a plan and then you show up to a restaurant and you're like, well, I don't want to wait for XYZ amount of time for my food, I'm going to go somewhere else. If you had planned ahead a little bit and left the house a little earlier, maybe you wouldn't have had to wait for your food at all. Okay, so this is about choices with your resources. Time is a resource, okay? It's not just money. All right, and then standards. What are your standards for how you make choices? The absolute baseline of what I will tolerate in my budget, okay? So if I decide I want to be bougie about food, okay, I buy expensive food and a lot of produce and a lot of like prime red meat and chicken. Like I go to the fresh market to get my meat instead of going to the Walmart and getting what's cheaper. All right, what are your standards? Are you willing to compromise on 1-ply toilet paper or do you live the 2-ply life? Okay, what are your standards and what are your baselines? And you have to figure this out as a person to decide how you're then going to allocate or move around your resources. All right, now let's talk about your preferences. Okay, do you prefer to wait until the last second and then scramble to get everything finished? Do you prefer to plan ahead and get everything done early? What are you about? Okay, so let's talk about with your preferences what economic success looks like. Okay, so what or who does that look like for you? Do you look up to a particular person as someone who embodies success? Do you look up to a certain standard? Like, I want to have made $75,000 a year by the time I'm 32. Does your success look like I have secured myself a sugar mama or sugar daddy by the time I'm 30 or whatever? Does success look like a house? Does it look like getting out of the block that you were born in? Does it look like getting out of the same county that you were born in? What does success look like for you? Do you want to just have your own space? Do you want to rent a house, buy a new car, buy your mom a new car? what does success actually look like for you? And you don't have to decide this right off the bat right now, but just kind of swish it around in your brain a little bit and think about it. What does success actually look like for you? All right. You also have to think about with your economic success, what assets can you provide? Okay. We're talking about financial influences. What do you bring to the table? Okay. If we're talking about like you as a person who is in like a relationship and you're trying to decide whether or not you're going to move in with your significant other, if y'all are going to buy a house together, what can you provide? Do you have a whole bunch of money in savings? Because that's going to influence whether or not I want to buy a house with you. Because if you're out here fooling around and you're burning all your money on random stuff, and I'm the only one who's out here saving money for a house, I might not want to buy a house with you because you're kind of irresponsible. You know what I'm saying? No offense, but full offense. You also have to consider this cool thing called marginal utility. All right, this is what value more of a resource can provide. Let's think about this. You got a pack of Oreos in front of you. If you are a person who dislikes Oreos, just pretend like you do for this example. All right? All right. So if you have a pack of Oreos in front of you, double stuff or mega stuff, we don't play that like normal Oreo game, okay? So let's say, just for our purposes, we got double stuffed Oreos in front of us, okay? And you have already eaten 6 Oreos. They're delicious. They're very tasty. They're fantastic. And if you're a person who likes milk, you got milk and Oreos. You've dipped them in there a little bit because we are not people who split Oreos open, okay? Do you eat a 7th Oreo? What can a 7th Oreo honestly bring to your life, okay? Besides 70 more calories to your body. Is it actually going to add more? If let's say we are talking about cars as another example, and you decide you want to buy, I don't know, let me think of a car. A 4Runner. Okay, I drive a 4Runner. So let's say you're looking at 2 different 4Runners, and one of them is the regular package, and one of them is the sports package. Okay, the regular package is $30,000. The sports package is $36,000. What can the sports package actually give to you? What can that extra $6,000 worth of a sports package actually give to you that the cheaper car cannot? Okay, and if you decide that the more expensive one is what you want because you think it's going to add a lot of value to your life, then buy it. But if you can honestly look at yourself in the mirror and be like, do I really need those fancier rims, or do I want to put $6,000 in my banking account, or in my checking account, or my savings account? It's really up to you, okay? That's what marginal utility is. If you already have a resource, what is a little bit more actually going to give to you? If you have watched 5 episodes of this show on Netflix, what is a 6th episode honestly going to give you? Okay? I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not one to binge watch, because I do binge watch shows, all right? But what is that extra part of a resource actually going to bring to you? That is marginal utility. So that is another thing you have to consider with financial influences. Okay, your government, oh lordy, that is not what that says. Your environment is also something that will influence you. Okay, so who I was over there. If you are looking around to see what other people are doing, or what other people are spending their money on, or how they choose to spend or save their money, that may influence how you spend your money. Even if you're like, I'm my own person, I'm not easily manipulated. Yes, you are. Okay, your environment impacts you. So, your physical, literal environment, the town, the city, the neighborhood, the state where you live, influences how you spend money, or how much of your money is given to the government or to your taxes or something. Okay, so the cost of living is the measure of a value for goods, services, and space. So, how much land costs in a location. Okay, so right now in North Carolina, in Eastern North Carolina, I was looking at houses the other day. I'm trying to buy a house. So I was looking at a little house. Well, not really little. It's a large house out in Ayden. And it was $129,000. It was 2,000 square feet. And it was 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. And then I looked at a house for the exact same price, $129,000, in Greenville. Not in Ayden, in Greenville. Okay? They were both equally far from South Central where I work. They were both a 10 to 15 minute drive, depending on traffic. The one in Greenville was 500 square feet smaller than the other one. Okay, had a much smaller yard. All right, However, since it was inside of the Greenville city limits, it was your value of a house is less. Okay. Anywho, so your cost of living is more expensive or less expensive depending on where you live. So another example would be like I paid like $1.15 a gallon for milk because I live in North Carolina. If I lived in Hawaii, you're like, I want to live in Hawaii. It's beautiful over there. And it's expensive as heck, okay? Because if you can't get something from the resources that are already on the islands of Hawaii, you have to have it shipped to you from either somewhere in China or somewhere in the continental United States. Okay, a gallon of milk in Hawaii is $4.50 a gallon on average. Okay, because it's more expensive to live there. Cost of living. It's expensive, people. All right, so your environment is going to influence how much you spend. All right, so we'll talk about how much it costs to live here in other cities, other states, or countries later on. All right, your government also influences how much money you have or how much money you spend. United States Congress influences you, so the House and the Senate all put together, as we know from civics. They decide tax codes, so what percent of your income do you have to give back to the government? They also decide what are called tax brackets. So in the United States, we have what's called a progressive income tax system. So the more money you make, the more money you have to chop up and send to the United States government every year. Okay, so someone who makes $1 million a year is going to pay more taxes than someone like, say, a public school teacher who makes $38,000 a year. Okay, I'm going to pay less of a percent of my money in taxes than somebody who's a millionaire because they have more money to throw around. That little percentage is going to hurt them less than it hurts me. Okay, so what percentage you actually pay? Is it 22? Is it 35? Is it 60? What percent of your income do you pay? It gets chopped up into things called tax brackets. All right, and we'll talk about that in our Unit 3 on taxes by itself. All right, the Federal Reserve also influences you. They decide what are called interest rates. So if you want to buy a car, and you go to the United States or the North Carolina Credit Union, you're like, hey, are you trying to give me some money so I can buy this cool car that I like? And they're like, we can. You have to pay us back plus interest. Interest is a fee for borrowing money, okay? So let's say, for example, let's take my car, for example. I bought my vehicle for $25,000 and some change. And I have to pay the credit union back the $25,000 that I borrowed from them on top of the interest that I owe them. So I have what's called a 4.5% interest rate. So besides, let me calculate this real quick so I can tell you legitimately what it is. So let's just say $25,000 even at 4.5%. I will pay them over the time that it takes me to pay them back over the next 4 or 5 years. I will pay them $1,125, and that's their fee that they keep for having me borrow their money. Okay, so they made $1,000 off of me because I borrowed money from them. Okay, the Federal Reserve decides these interest rates. The same thing goes for a house. So let's say I buy a $100,000 house. Having trouble using the calculator, people. And I buy a house at 3.5% interest rate. Over time, I'm going to pay $3,500 to the bank for helping me out. Okay, that's what I'm going to have to do. All right, they also manipulate reserve requirements, so how much money is in the vault at the bank and how much money to print for other people. The economy also influences you. So how's the economy doing? Are we good? Are we struggling? Where are we at? Okay, so this is how we figure out how the economy is doing. It's like a whole bunch of waves, okay? So are we in the bottom? Are we in a trough? Are we expanding? Are we doing real well at a peak? Or are we in a recession? Currently in the United States economy, we are in a recession because we have been growing our economy. Our economy's been doing like slowly, it's like a roller coaster, slowly going up the coaster since 2009. And then in March of 2020, or February of 2020, I should say, right around the time that COVID struck, but a little bit before that, we were already naturally heading into a recession because we were doing like real rock star, and then once what goes up must come down. So we had to come back down a little bit into a recession. And then at this point, people are getting laid off. People are not able, like employers are not able to pay employees, so they're laying people off. Businesses are closing. There's pay cuts to people who still have a job. So that impacts how you spend your money as well. All right, so overall, you have your choices, your preference, your environment, and your government that are influencing how you spend your money. And we'll dig into that in much more detail in Unit 2 and 3. And this has been Financial Influences.